On the evening of the 28th of August, 1985, in a small house on Martha's Vineyard, Ruth Gordon quietly closed her eyes. Alone, no audience, no stage lights. The woman who once brought Hollywood to its knees with Rosemary's Baby passed away, leaving behind only an old hair clip and a secret no one could decipher. She was an icon of resilience, with that bold smile in Harold and Maude, but behind the glamour were scars. A burned letter, a shattered love, a hidden child. People say she conquered every prejudice, but why did she choose to die in silence, refusing the hospital? A neighbor recounted. A few days before, Ruth received an envelope with no name, read it, trembled, and then let the flames consume it. Was that a curse from the past, or a truth she didn't want anyone to know? Sit back. The story of Ruth Gordon isn't just about the stage lights. It's about broken pieces, and we're going to uncover the truth. Chapter 1. The Letter That Killed the Dream. Quincy, Massachusetts, 1910. Folks whispered that Ruth Gordon's father, a stern sea captain, once tried to sell her to a traveling circus. "That girl's nothing but a dreamer," he'd growl on those rare visits home, his voice echoing through the rickety wooden house. Ruth, the 14-year-old girl, small and frail from asthma, paid her father no mind. She'd sneak into the local theater, where the dim lights shone on the stage of Peter Pan. Her eyes lit up. Peter's wings, the applause, that was the world she belonged to. But back home, reality weighed heavy. That night, Ruth curled up on the cold wooden floor, a thin blanket barely keeping her warm. Outside the door, the waves crashed on the shore like her father's voice, roaring disappointment. Her father, Clinton Jones, was always away at sea for months. When he returned, he brought the smell of salt and shouts. Her mother, Annie, quietly mended clothes in the corner, trying to hold the family together. But poverty clung to them. Some suppers were just dry bread, and Ruth learned to dream through the hunger. In 1914, at 18, Ruth did something bold. She packed a few clothes, took the little money she'd saved, and boarded a train to New York. The big city, full of lights and chances, but also full of harshness. Hollywood, where she dreamed of going, didn't welcome her with open arms. Producers looked at her and shook their heads. Too short, too ordinary, one declared. They didn't just laugh, they looked at her like a joke. Ruth left auditions in silence, clutching her crumpled script, her self-respect torn apart. But she didn't give up. She turned to Broadway stages, where the lights were kinder. In 1915, she got a small role in Peter Pan. A first step, tiny, but shining. She stood on stage, feeling the warmth of the lights, and knew she was right. But there was something no one knew. A family friend said Ruth's mother once hid a letter from her father, sent from a distant port. In it, he begged her to come back, saying the family needed her more than ever. That letter vanished, as if it never existed. Ruth never mentioned her father again, like he was a ghost. In her memoir, she wrote that back in Quincy, she'd sit by the window, staring at the sea, imagining herself flying like Peter Pan. But reality had no magic. Peter Pan flew on stage, free and immortal. But Ruth knew well, no one flies away from the shadow of the past. There was something strange. An old neighbor recalled that before leaving Quincy, Ruth left a drawing on the table. A little girl by a circus, with scribbled words, "I won't be sold." Just think about it. A young girl, standing in New York, carrying a dream bigger than the city, but holding tight to a buried secret. Did she really leave the past behind? Or was she hiding something unspeakable? And was that letter the start of secrets that would follow her all her life? Chapter 2. The Half-Hearted Forgiveness and the Secret Behind It. Ruth Gordon once burned nearly all her husband's letters after he died, except one. In it, "I forgive you." Forgive what? No one knows. Looking back to 1918, Ruth, a 22-year-old Broadway star, walked into a theater in Manhattan. The soft golden lights lit her face, her eyes full of ambition. There, she met Gregory Kelly, an actor whose smile made her heart skip. They fell deeply in love, like in a romantic play. Long nights, they sat in their small apartment, the smell of old wood and cigarette smoke lingering. Scripts scattered on the table, next to cold coffee cups. They read lines to each other, laughing loud, as if the world was just the two of them. Ruth wrote in her memoir that she once thought, "This is forever." They married, and she dreamed of long days together, under the stage lights, where they both belonged. But in 1927, it all shattered. Kelly, just 36, collapsed from a heart attack. Ruth was there, holding his hand, feeling the warmth fade. She could do nothing. In an interview, she said that night she sat by the window, rain tapping on the glass, thinking of ending it all. A week later, in the cold room, she opened Kelly's brown leather suitcase. The lock clicked open. Inside, the smell of old soap and a bundle of letters tied with silk. The top one, in shaky handwriting. "I forgive you, Ruth. I always forgive." She tossed letter after letter into the fireplace. The red flames roared, like trying to swallow words not meant to be reread. But she kept that one, clutching it like part of herself. A friend of Kelly's said Ruth once cried in the dressing room, murmuring, "I didn't deserve his love." There were whispers that Ruth had started a relationship with Jed Harris, a powerful producer, while Kelly was still alive. A colleague said she saw Ruth and Harris whispering in a dark theater corner, eyes furtive, hands touching a second too long. But there was something strange. A close friend of Kelly's said that weeks before he died, he wrote in his notebook, "She doesn't belong only to me." What did he know? Another actor recalled Kelly, one drunk night, staring at Ruth from afar, muttering, "She'll go farther than me, but at what cost?" Ruth stood by the fireplace, watching the fire burn, ashes falling softly. The letter she kept, like a reminder of a secret she couldn't speak. Just think about it. A young woman, just losing her first love, standing before the ashes of letters. Fire destroyed the past, but not the pain. Did guilt over Jed Harris push Ruth to the edge? Or was there something else in the letter she didn't burn? Or did Kelly know more than he ever said? But Ruth's tragedy didn't end there. Another secret, bigger, waited in the shadows. Chapter 3. The threat at the peak that brought it all down. If you keep going, I'll make sure you never act again. That letter, on theater stationery, vanished forever. But what followed couldn't be erased. In 1929, Ruth Gordon gave birth to a son, Jones Harris, in a small New York hospital. No legal father. The child's father, Jed Harris, the producer who once stirred her heart, refused to acknowledge him. Scandal erupted. Newspapers called her a fallen woman. Ruth, Broadway's muse, now criticized across the city. She walked out of the old theater, snow falling quietly on the sidewalk. People passed without a greeting. A single mother, invisible in the glamorous world. She clutched her thin coat, feeling the cold seep into her bones. Ruth fought Harris in court, but he was a giant in the industry. A close friend said Harris's threatening letter came on a rainy night, on yellowed theater paper, words sharp as knives. Ruth read it, hands shaking, then made it disappear. She raised Jones alone in cramped apartments, the smell of damp and smoke clinging to the curtains. Some nights, she sat by his bed, streetlights slipping through the blinds, lighting the boy's face. She murmured, "I won't let them hurt you." Hollywood, already harsh, grew even more distant. A director said bluntly, "A single mother, no one wants her on screen." Ruth hid Jones's existence for years. She worked day and night, writing scripts, taking small roles, though her heart was scarred. A colleague said she saw Ruth in the dressing room, holding a stack of papers, eyes red. "They think I'm done," she said. But there was something strange. A friend said Ruth once left an unsent letter to Harris, tucked in an old wooden box. In it, she wrote, "You destroyed me, but I won't let you touch my son." She never sent it, but at the end of her life, she kept that letter in her makeup box, among lipsticks and cracked mirrors. An acquaintance said Ruth once stared at the makeup box, murmuring, "Some things shouldn't be reopened. Just think about it." A young woman, on the edge of scandal and stage lights, protecting her child with her whole life. Ruth once wrote, "I won't let you touch my son." But at the end of her life, she still kept that letter in her makeup box. Did Harris's threatening letter really vanish? Or did Ruth hide it to protect a bigger secret, not just for herself, but for the next generation. But Hollywood waited for her, with closed doors and whispers more vicious than ever. Chapter 4. The Letter That Erased a Star. After the audition, Ruth stood alone in the dark hallway. She murmured, "They want me to disappear." Her voice small, swallowed by the theater's shadows. The 1940s. Ruth, now 40, stepped into Hollywood with a heart full of hope. She'd made Broadway audiences stand and applaud, but the silver screen was a different world. Producers looked at her, shook their heads. "Too old," they said. "Too odd." Variety in 1943 wrote plainly, "Ruth Gordon doesn't fit the screen." She auditioned time after time, only to get scornful looks. A supporting role in a film noir seemed hers. But the next morning, the assistant director called, "Sorry, change from above." Ruth hung up, hands trembling, lips pressed tight. She lived in cheap boarding rooms, cigarette smoke clinging to the curtains. She hung an old dress in the room, the one from her first lead on Broadway. But now it was faded, frayed, like her dreams. Some nights, she sat at the table, staring at cold coffee, wondering where she went wrong. Depression and drink became companions. A director in 1945 said, after a failed audition, Ruth stood alone, clutching her wrinkled script, her eyes empty, as if Hollywood had taken her light. A friend said a big producer once told her straight, "You'll never make it here unless you change everything." Those words like a knife, but there was something strange. Another actor said Ruth saw her name crossed off an audition list, next to a handwritten note, "Not suitable." Who wrote that? A colleague whispered that Ruth found an anonymous letter in her mailbox, just, "Leave Hollywood." She tore it up right away, but her eyes changed. Ruth returned to Broadway, where the lights were gentler, but her heart was heavy. She walked New York streets, cold wind through her thin coat. Some nights, she stood before the mirror, seeing wrinkles, years of struggle, wondering if she belonged. A friend said Ruth once left a note in her boarding room. "They don't want me, but I'm still here." She kept acting, kept writing, each step a battle. But that anonymous letter, though torn, seemed to haunt her. She filed it away in her mind, like the old letters. From her father, from Kelly, from Harris. Just think about it. A woman who once had whole theaters applauding, now turned away by Hollywood like an outsider. She stood in an empty theater, stage lights dimmed. Maybe they didn't want her to fail. Maybe they never gave her a chance. But Ruth didn't quit. 2 decades later, one role would change everything. Would she find light in Hollywood's shadows, or just another secret waiting? Chapter 5. The Red Notebook, Holding the Curse. A fan recalled. Ruth sat quietly in the dark theater, then turned and whispered, as if to no one, "This movie knows more than it should." In 1968, at 72, Ruth Gordon stunned the world. Her role as Minnie Castevet in Rosemary's Baby won her the Golden Oscar statue. She became a quirky witch, smile both sweet and scary, like she was born for it. Audiences were captivated, standing to applaud. But after the awards, Ruth avoided talking about Rosemary's Baby. Once, backstage, she whispered to a co-star, "Minnie won't leave me. She follows me home." She walked off the set, stage lights casting her shadow long and twisted, like something not hers anymore. But there was something strange. The film carried whispers of a curse. Sidney Blackmer, her co-star, died not long after. Others tied to the movie met misfortune. Ruth grew quiet. A colleague said she kept a small notebook, written only in red ink. Once Garson walked in, saw her tear a page and burn it in the ashtray. No one knew what was on it. She dodged interviews about the film, eyes distant. A close friend said she woke at night, screaming about eyes in the dark. Just nightmares? Or did she see something on set? A secret Hollywood wanted hidden? A crew member said Ruth found a note in her makeup room. "Watch out for Minnie." She folded it, tucked it away, and said nothing more. Ruth kept acting, smiling for the public, but her eyes changed. She stood under stage lights, but the glow now cold, like street lights on lonely New York nights. Letters, notebook, whispers, all like puzzle pieces she didn't want to solve. She told a friend that Rosemary's Baby reminded her of old letters. From her father, from Kelly, from Harris, like the past returning in a new form. Just think about it. A woman at the height of fame, haunted by the role that saved her career. Was Ruth truly afraid of Rosemary's Baby curse? Or did she uncover something scarier, hidden in those red notebook pages? But the stage lights never let her rest. One day, she'd return to the small house where a different light waited. Chapter 6. The Envelope That Burned the Truth. On the morning of the 28th of August, 1985, Ruth Gordon sat in her small house on Martha's Vineyard. She sipped tea, morning sun slipping through the window, lighting her silver hair. Garson Conan, her second husband, read a fan letter praising Harold and Maude. Ruth smiled, whispering, "I remember that dress." But she was weakening, high blood pressure a silent threat. She refused the hospital, telling Garson, "I want to die at home." The night before, Ruth tidied her vanity, wiped the mirror clean, and placed an old hair clip from the 40s on it, as if preparing for someone coming. She'd lived under thousands of stage lights, but that evening, only the quiet desk lamp shone on her silver hair. No audience, no applause. There was something strange. A neighbor said a few days earlier, Ruth got an envelope with no name, no postmark. She read it, face paling, then burned it in the fireplace. No one asked, and Garson never mentioned it. A friend said that morning, Ruth looked out to sea, murmuring, "I hate dying because it'll bother everyone." Those words lingered. What did she know? That night, she lay down, held Garson's hand, and passed in her sleep. Peaceful. Too peaceful. An acquaintance said, after Ruth died, Garson found a small note in her drawer. "Don't look anymore." Who left that message? Or did Ruth write it herself, as a final goodbye? That anonymous envelope linked to old secrets. Her father's letter, Kelly's, Harris's, the note from the set. Ruth once told a friend, "Some things belong in the dark." She stood on stages her whole life, but chose to leave in the small house, where light was gentler. Was she tired of secrets? Or did she know something no one should? Just think about it. A woman who lived under lights her whole life, choosing to go in silence. She'd lived under thousands of stage lights, but that evening, only the quiet desk lamp. What was in that last letter? Or did Ruth take her biggest secret with her, leaving us with pieces never complete? Conclusion. The lights hiding the curse. Ruth Gordon lived a life many only dream of. From a poor girl in Quincy, she stepped onto Broadway stages, won an Oscar at 72, and wrote romantic comedy scripts that shaped Hollywood. Harold and Maude made audiences laugh and cry. Adam's Rib captivated the world. She inspired Meryl Streep. Women told they were too old to dream. But Ruth wasn't just glamour. She was a heart full of scars. Losing Gregory Kelly, her first love. Scandal over her child born out of wedlock. Years Hollywood turned away, calling her odd. And the shadow of Rosemary's Baby, with whispers of a curse. An old letter. She always kept it with her, in a worn book. Some guessed it was Kelly's, others Harris's. A museum worker said, when clearing her room after she passed, they didn't find that letter. Some nights, Ruth sat alone, staring out the window, clutching that book, like it held her whole life. A fan wrote, Ruth didn't just carry secrets. She carried the curse Hollywood never dared name. Was it Kelly's betrayal, Harris's threat, or the watch out for Minnie note from the set? Her death that day on Martha's Vineyard was called a stroke. But why refuse the hospital? Why burn the last letter? Ruth's life teaches us you can overcome anything, poverty, judgment, loss, but not without cost. She was a rebel, but also a victim of her time. A woman laughing loud before the world, but crying quietly in the dark. Her legacy endures. A theater named for her in Quincy, immortal roles, and the story of a woman who never gave in. But the question lingers, like sea wind on Martha's Vineyard. From the circus her father once meant to sell her to the witch role that scared the world. Ruth never escaped the light, but the light never spared her either.